In this lecture, we are going to study how can we make this advanced login system more interactive by adding a drop down and next and previous button to this dashboard which is there on this screen too. Let's begin with defining the required components of this screen too. So for that we need to come on this design panel, and I'm going to eliminate this image button which is there right now on this screen too. Now I am going to define this drop down box over here. Let's expand it a little bit. Fine. And besides, I am going to have an image button right in the center like this. Let's change some properties of this image button. So we need to come down over here, and I am going to change this fit image from contain to fill. Okay, or let's make it cover. Fine. Okay, now I am going to define a code in this workspace with the help of which we can pull the IDs of all the people who have registered their profiles on this platform. So for doing that, we can make use of this uneven block, and let's define one right in the bottom in this workspace. Okay, now the ID of this drop down is drop down 2. So we need to select drop down 2 from this first drop down. Now when the user will hit this first drop down, I would like to see all the IDs, all the email IDs with which different users registered their profiles on this platform to get reflected in the options section of this drop down. So you know what we are trying to do now? We are trying to pull more than 2 records in one go from a particular table that is there present on the data browser connected to this app. How can we do that? And what is the best way of doing this? See, if you want to pull more than 1 records in one go from a particular table, then you can make use of list type of variable, or you can say collection type of variable. Now how can you do that? That's what I'm going to tell you. So first of all, I am converting it into text-based coding, and here inside this uneven block I am going to make use of this read records block, because you know we need to read the records first from the users named table in which all the information is getting saved. So let's define it right inside this uneven block like this, and after this we can replace this name with the name of the table in which the information of all the users are getting saved. So users is the name of the table. Okay, now how to pull more than 2 IDs? So as I've told you, we need to define a list type of variable. Now where to define it? We can give some space in between this read records and for loop, and in between these 2 lines of code we can define a list type of variable. Now the keyword with which you can define a variable on this JavaScript based platform is var, right? So var, let's make use of this variable list. Okay, and equal to, then you have to place these 2 brackets. Fine, and there should be nothing in these 2 brackets. It's an empty list that I have defined over here. It means that a variable named list has been defined, and it is an empty list right now because there is nothing in between these 2 rectangular brackets, right? Now I am going to eliminate everything whatever is written inside this for loop. So we can do it like this. Make use of this set text block, and inside this I am going to write down the ID of this drop down. So it is drop down 2, right? And let's place a comma, and inside this we are going to keep this line of code. Fine. Now let's see whether this will give us the right output or not. We haven't made use of this list type of variable yet. We have defined it over here, but we haven't made use of it anywhere. Just because I want to show you whether this code that I've defined inside this for loop is going to give us the correct output or not. Fine, let's run this app. Let's create the first one. So I'm going to upload a pic first, and I am going to register it with this ID, and Gaurav123 is the password I am defining for my profile. So I'm done with registering my profile on this platform. Let's reset this app and run it again. So I'm going to create 4 different profiles like this. Now this is the second profile I'm creating, and let's select this one. Anubhav@gmail.com. Anu123 is the password I'm giving to
Your
this
profile
profile.
has been created successfully.
Okay, so the profile has got successfully created. Let's reset this app and run it again. So I'm going to create now a profile. Let's take this pic, amit@gmail.com, and here amit123 is the password I am defining for this profile.
Your profile has been created successfully.
Okay, so I'm done with creating 3 different profiles on this platform. Now I'm going to create the last one. So for this I am going to pick up this photograph, Aniket. Okay, Aniket @gmail.com is the ID I am registering this profile with, and Aniket123 is the password
Your
I'm giving.
profile has been created successfully.
Okay, so now as you can see in this users named table, we have 4 different profiles information. Okay, so I am going to run this app again, and this time I am going to sign in into this app with my own ID. So this is the one which I am going to use. Let's make use of this password. Let's hit this login button and see what is going to happen. Profile pic is getting reflected, and the ID also with which I registered my profile is visible to me over here. Now if I'll hit this drop down in order to execute this code which I've defined over here in this workspace of Applab, let's see whether I'll be able to get anything or not. So I'm not able to get any IDs over here in this drop down. Now why is it happening? Just because this code over here that I've defined inside this for loop is not able to fetch the IDs with which I registered the 4 profiles. Right, for that what we can do, we can eliminate everything from here. Fine, and let's make use of this list type of variable that we have defined in between line number 83 and 85. So first of all we need to append all the email IDs to this list type of variable. Now how can we do that? So if you'll come on this variable section, you will be able to find a very beautiful block over here right in the bottom of this section. The name of this block is append item. So you just have to pick it and drop it over here inside this for loop, and by default list is already there. Fine. So this is the name of the collection kind of variable in which you would like to store all the information you're going to pull up from this users named table. Now what is the information you want to pull? So we would like to pull all the email IDs with which we registered different users, right? So for doing that we can make use of this simple line of code, which is records dot email, right? Now all the IDs are going to get saved in this collection type of variable. Finally, we would like all the IDs to get reflected in this drop down which we have defined on this beautiful dashboard, the ID of which is drop down 2. Right. So for doing that, we can come outside this for loop. Fine. And here we guys can make use of set property block, which you can easily find in this control UI control section of the toolbox. So here it is. I'm looking for set property right now. So this is the one. Let's pick it and drop it over here. Now the idea of this drop down is drop down too. So that's the reason we can convert it into block based coding and select the idea of this drop down right in the first part of this set property. So this is the one we are looking for, and let's now define the options part for this drop down. For doing that, we need to select options from this second drop down. So here it is. Let's change this to text based coding. Now we need to eliminate everything from here, and we need to write down the name of the list type of variable in which all the email IDs are getting saved. So this is the name of that variable. Let's pick it and place it over here. Fine, so I'm done with defining the required code. Now let's see whether we'll be able to get the desired output or not. So I need to run this app one more time. I'm not going to create any more profiles on this platform. Instead of that, I'm going to come on that sign in screen directly, and here I am going to log in into my dashboard by using my own email address. Okay, so we are able to see now all the IDs with which we created the 4 different profiles which are right now present in this users named table. Right, all the IDs which you are able to see here are getting reflected over here also in this options section of the drop down. Fine, so that's how you can make use of collection type of variable in order to pull more than one information from a particular table in one go. Right, now let's come back on this coding part. The second thing which I would like to do is, if I will select any of these 4 IDs, I would like the profile pic that I uploaded for this ID, whatever ID I'll select from this drop down, to get reflected in this image button that I have defined on this screen too. So how can I code that part? That's what I'm going to tell you now. Right below this image button, let's define a button. Fine. And here I am going to change this to pull the photograph. Fine. And here I am going to rename the ID of this button to pull. Okay, let's now go back on that coding panel. So in order to pull the photograph of the selected ID, what I can do, we can define an uneven block for this button. The ID of this button is pull, so we need to make the required changes over here in this first drop down of this uneven block. Now as soon as the user will hit this pull button, I would like to see the photograph of the selected ID getting reflected over here. So for doing that, see, all the information is there in the users named table. If you want to pull anything from that table, so we need to for that we can make use of this read records block. Fine, and now we can change this to users. So the thing which we have right now with us is the ID part, is the email ID part. So in order to pull the relevant information, we can define the name of that column, information of which we have at present over here in between these 2 curly brackets. And here I need to get the text for this email ID. We can get it from this drop down too. Right, and whatever information is going to come from that information, I need to pull the URL of the image which the user uploaded while creating his or her profile using this ID. Right, So for doing that, we can make use of uh, this set image URL property, which you can easily find in the UI control section of the toolbox. So I'm going to put it over here, and let's change this to the ID of this image button, which is image 6. Fine. And here this URL, I am going to replace it with uh, records I dot photo, because the photos are getting saved in this photo named column. Let me show it to you. Okay, so this is where the table is going to get created when the user will hit this sign up button. And as you can see, there are 3 columns which are going to get created automatically in that user's name table. The first one is email, second one is password, and the third one is photo. Right, so that is the reason I have defined photo over here. Right, now let's see whether we'll be able to get the required output from this code we have defined inside this onEvent block we have in this workspace for this pull named button. Let's run this app. So I'm going to sign in again with my own ID. So this is the password. I'm able to see all the IDs getting reflected over here. Fine, let's select this ID amit@gmail.com. Now I'm going to hit this pull button. Let's see whether we'll be able to pull this photograph of Amit we uploaded while creating his profile on this platform or not with the help of this code we have defined over here in this workspace. So we are able to see Amit's photograph, right? Isn't it amazing? Yeah, it is. So let's select something else. So let's go for this anubhav@gmail.com. I'm going to hit this pull button again for checking whether it is working fine or not. Okay, so the image has changed. Now I'm able to see the image which I uploaded for Anubhav's profile, right? So it is working perfectly fine. Let's reset this app. Now I'm going to tell you how can we define next and previous button. Fine, for the on this dashboard. Let's come on this designing part, and I'm going to make use of this image button. Let's put it over here. Let's come down in this properties section and let's choose an icon for this image button we have placed on this screen too. So I'm going to come on this icon section and select a relevant icon for that button. So here I can type, I'm searching for previous button. So I can type PREV over here. So these are a couple of good icons you're going to come across. I am selecting this one for now. Fine, and let's reduce the size a little bit. Okay, now it is looking good. And if you want to see it in white color, suppose, so you can change the icon color to white. So this is the code for white color, 6 times F, 1 2 3 4 5 6. So now it will be visible to us in white color like this. Now I am going to select this image 7. Fine, and let's create a duplicate of this button. For doing that, we need to press Ctrl and C for copying this on the clipboard. Now we can press Ctrl and V together for creating a duplicate of this button. Let's put it over here. Fine. So I want to see it pointing towards this side, towards right side. So what we can do, we can change this left to right, and we'll be able to see the output over here. Fine, so it is looking perfectly fine. Now I am going to change the IDs of both these buttons. So this one I am going to name it as PREV for previous, and this one I am going to let's name it as next. Fine, let's now define the code for these two buttons. So for that we need to come on this coding panel. Okay, now here I am going to again make use of this onEvent block and place it over here right in the bottom. Now the ID of this image button is prev. I need to change this to prev. So when the user will hit this previous button, I would like the ID over here and the photograph over here to change. So why I have defined these two buttons over here? So that any user who has registered his profile on this platform can check out the IDs as well as photograph of the other people. Fine. So it is going to be like a profile management system for us now. Fine. So how can we define the coding for that thing? So for doing that, what we can do, we can define uh, a counter variable right on the top, and we can initialize it with 0. Okay, now when the user will hit this previous button, what should happen? I would like the value of x to get decremented by 1. Okay, and then I would like to pull up the required information from this user's named table. Okay, and on what basis I would like to pull up the information? I would like to pull up the information for these two fields on the basis of the IDs which are getting reflected over here. Fine, so these are auto-generated IDs. We have not defined the code for these IDs. They get generated automatically. Fine, for every record that gets created on in a particular table that we have on this data browser connected to our application. So this profile is present against this ID1. Anubhav's ID is present against this ID2. So with these IDs we can fetch the required details for these two components. Let me show it to you. How can we do that? So here we can write down ID because we want to match the ID part now. And from which thing can we match this ID part? We can match it up with the value of x. Okay, and let's eliminate everything whatever is there inside this for loop. Now on the basis of this ID, I would like to see the photograph and the email ID of that person whose profile is present against this ID in that table named users. So let's do that. So let's make use of setText property, and here I am going to define the ID of this drop down, which is drop down to, and let's get the details for this drop down from the email field of this user's named table. And for this photograph we require the URL of the image, right? So we can make use of a set image URL property. The ID of this component is image6. Fine, and the photos are getting saved in the column named photo. Okay, and let's do the same thing for the next button too. The only thing that we have to change is, let's first copy this whole code and place it over here. Now let's replace this ID of let's replace this ID with the ID of this button, which is next. Now every time the user will hit the next button, I would like the value of x to get incremented by 1. Right, now let's check out whether we are going to get the right output with the help of this code we have defined over here or not. So I'm going to run this app again, and let's sign in again with this ID. Fine.
You
Okay, now I am able to see Anubhav's photograph over here, and his ID is getting reflected right on the top in this drop down, right? So as you can see, the ID is also getting changed and the photographs are also changing, right? So this is the beautiful thing which you can get with the help of this simple code that we have defined in this workspace over here. So you guys can navigate now in between these profiles we created in the beginning. Fine. So it's now a profile management kind of system. We have converted this login system into. Right. Hope you guys enjoyed this lecture a lot. Thank you very much for watching this video. Do like and share this video in your groups so that more and more students can come and join this channel. Thank you very much. God bless you all and have a great day. Bye bye.